Hannity and his crew roll in here about 9:15 or 9:20. We start the interview at 9:45. It's over, then they start tearing down, and they're gone. It's amazing. There's no evidence that anybody was here, and yet there must have been 35 people in this building, all told. But that interview went longer than 45 minutes, didn't it? Or was it about 45? I didn't check the clock either way. But it's a two-parter on the Hannity Show on the Fox News Channel tonight. Part 1 at 9 o'clock, and tomorrow night, part 2. And it was awesome, folks. For once, I'm kind of eager to see it. I never want to watch myself on TV. I never like it. But everybody just raving about this. Snerdley was raving about it. Catherine was raving about it. Dawn was raving about it. When they don't like it, they say so. So, that's that. My niece is on the Hannity staff. She was here today. The Kami Babe makeup artist. Deborah does not look a day older than, she's aging so it's incredible. No, it's not good makeup in her case. She told me her kids now are 21 and 17. And when she was the makeup specialist for Rush Limbaugh, the TV show, how many kids? This is anyway. Thanks for being with us today, folks. The telephone number, if you want to be on the program, is 800-282-2882. By the way, a full court press is on to get me to do TV again. You should have seen this. They were coming at me from even the lighting and sound people. You really do need to be back on TV. Full court press. I'm beginning to think now the caller we had yesterday about this was a staged, set-up caller by somebody who wants this to happen. Okay, the two big news items today are the tax cut that was announced. The president and the Republicans in the House announced this sweeping tax reform plan. And, of course, the latest in the National Football League. And it defies common sense what is happening in the NFL. There's a headline today in a Green Bay newspaper that the Packers are prepared to defy their fans, the Packers players. And you know something? That's pretty much a good way to describe what is happening in this whole thing in the NFL. It's the fans are being defied. And I'll give you a little heads up. I told Hannity the NFL interview kind of Snerdley said, you really got emotional during that. And I didn't start to cry. Don't think of that. But what's happening in the NFL rips my heart out. And they are. I don't think the NFL knows who their audience is. Or if they do, they're embarrassed of it. But the NFL viewer, the average target marketing of the NFL, is not trying to get a white wine and brie sipping cheese eater. These are people that buy Ford F-150s and buy beer by the case. And it's like the NFL's trying to market to left-wing social justice warrior snowflakes, and that's not who's watching the game, and that's not who's going to make the game. Those are the people that wish the game didn't exist as it does. It's amazing to watch this happen. Everybody knows where the public opinion comes down on this, and they are going against it, and that is the corruption that the left brings to something. So we'll get into that a little later. There's a Thursday night game. It's the Bears and the Packers in Green Bay tonight. And Aaron Rodgers, the quarterback, has asked all the fans to link arms. The fans don't want to do this. The fans don't want this stuff brought into the stadium. The fans don't want to have a political test. They don't have to pass or fail. They just want these guys to play football. What the fans are paying to see. They're not paying people to see. They're not paying to see people diss the flag. And by the way, everybody's walking that back now, because they know they're losing this on the PR side. This is not disrespecting the flag. This is not disrespecting America. This is nothing about it. Yes, it is. It's about the NFL being used now to advance the leftist agenda, and the NFL itself is under target because the left doesn't like it, period, because of what it stands for. It stands for much of what they don't like: strong, masculine, rugged individualism with unified team concepts, patriotism, love of country, uniquely American game. You go to college campuses, folks, and they are now teaching courses on how to demasculinize men, or demasculate men. They really are. We've mentioned it to you. I don't know how many people remember, but masculinity is under assault, just like white privilege is under assault. Because white privilege and white men, in the broad picture, represent the scourge of this country. They're the ones that got us into trouble. They're the ones that did all the discriminating. They're the ones that did all the bigotry. They're the ones that did they stole all the money, so forth and so on. So we'll get to that, but up first is the tax plan. And I'm going to tell you right off the bat, I have watched some cable news last night and today, because I broke my promise to myself. I wanted to see what was said about it, and it is incredible. And I want to tell you that if you're watching any of the three networks, or CNN or MSNBC, do not believe what you're hearing. It is not trickle down. It doesn't even come close to trickle down. It does not benefit the rich. It does not punish the middle class or the poor. It doesn't do any of the things the Democrats in the media are saying about it. They are attacking this plan like they've been attacking every tax cut since Reagan's. They have a playbook, and they have a script, and they have things to say, and it doesn't matter what's actually in the plan. They just, as robotically as they can, doesn't matter, Schumer, Pelosi, whoever, they stride to the microphones and cameras, and they start denouncing it the same way they denounce every Republican proposed tax plan since 1986. And I'm telling you, don't believe any of it. I'm going to tell you what's in this plan. I had it explained to me last night. And let me tell you how that started. I got the phone call from a ranking Republican who wanted to fill me in, clue me in on the tax plan. Wanted to give it to me straight, wanted to give it to me man to man, heart to heart, before it was distorted. And so I heard the details that the Republicans think are important. And in no particular order, here it is. We're going to reform the tax code so that you and 99% of Americans can fill out their tax forms on a postcard. We are reducing 7 rates to 3. The rates are going to be 10%, 12%, 28%, and 39.6%. I was told the top rate is not coming down. I was told that to 35% or anything else. I was told that there isn't a surcharge on the rich. I was told that state and local taxes will no longer be deductible on your federal return. Now, if that holds up, and none of this has even been officially presented, and a lot of this is going to change before they vote on it, if they do, and they want to vote on it in December. But let's just treat this as the thing that actually goes through Congress and gets voted on. If they succeed in eliminating the deduction of state income taxes, do you know who is going to get stuck like pigs on that? People who live in blue states. California, the top income tax rate in California is 13%. That is a lot of money to everybody. I don't care what income level you are in California, your tax rate is high, and you're paying a lot, and you're no longer going to be able to deduct it. Most of the people in California are Democrats. This is going to starve state governments of a lot of money. A lot of money. when people cannot deduct their state income taxes, and these blue states are going to have to get a little austere or something because they're going to be financially hit by this. There are some red states that have significantly high income tax rates, but mostly they're blue. Illinois, California, New York. And if this holds up, they're going to be paying through the nose. Then there was talk that property taxes would also not be deductible, but that supposedly is not true as it stands now. You will be able to deduct your property taxes from your income tax. The standard deduction, the exemption, has been doubled from 12 grand to 24 grand. The alternative minimum tax has been gotten rid of. That is so huge. And that is the reason, and the corporate tax rate reduction, those are the two things that have Schumer and Pelosi and the Democrats running around calling this the usual Republican tax cut for the rich when it isn't. The rich are not going to have their taxes cut. Their tax rate is I was told, is probably not going to change. It's going to be up to what happens in the committees. And then I was told the reason why is that President Trump did this. When they finished telling me all the details, I studiously noted that they hadn't described anything about the top marginal rate to me. They didn't say anything about it. So I courageously and bravely said, well, what about the 39.6 rate? The reaction, that's the president. The president wants that. That's not us. President said guys like him don't deserve a tax cut. You go talk to him. I mean, they laid that off on Trump. I mean, it didn't take 2 seconds. You go talk to Trump. The president, he's insisted that the rich not get a reduction in their rate. Guys like him don't need a tax cut. Well, I turned around and said, now you're telling me that the reason for this is to grow the economy. That's what the president says. That's right. We want to create jobs and we want to grow the economy. I said, well, this isn't going to do it. You can't have a tax rate reduction that does not reduce the rates on high-income earners and have economic growth. Not like you're thinking. Why not? Well, because those are the people who hire. Those are the people, by definition, who have money and they've succeeded. And if you're not going to change their tax rate and you're going to monkey around with their deductions so they don't have any, you are leaving out of your growth engine the people that already pay 70% of all taxes. The top 10% of wage earners in America pay 70% of all income tax revenue. The top 1% pay about 39%, folks. This talk that the rich get a tax cut, the rich aren't paying their fair share, it's demonstrably false. And everybody on cable TV telling you that the rich are getting a huge tax cut here is not right. They are lying to you or they are misinformed. Now, the alternative minimum tax being eliminated, that's a big deal, but not just for the rich, that's for everybody. That was catching a lot of people that were never intended to be caught. The corporate rate will go from 35% down to 20. And of course, the Democrats are going to really launch on that because they hate corporations anyway. Corporations aren't people. And the corporate rate going 35 to 20, making it competitive with other nations' tax rates on business around the world. Sensible thing to do, but here come the Democrats demagoguing it. Well, that's a tax break for the rich. It's not. There are people that work for corporations who benefit from the corporations showing more profit, which means they hire more people. It's just absurd to continue after all these years to listen to the usual lies and demagoguery from these people, which does not change. Now, there's another key element of this, and for lack of a better term, I'm going to call it the subchapter S pass-through. There are a number of Oh, yes, the estate tax is ending, and that's another way the rich are going to get really, really richer. The Democrats think when you die that the government ought to get over half of your estate. This tax plan thinks that the inheritors should not have to give up half of what was earned to the government. So the estate tax has been blown away. Schumer and Pelosi and the media are going to be harping on that as a tax break for the rich. And the subchapter S pass-through, the way this works, this plan would cap the tax rate on businesses whose income is reported on individual returns. You know, if you own a small business, you can file your business return, your subchapter S, on your personal tax form. If you have a sole proprietorship or a sub S, and the pass-through, that's pass-through, the income of your business passes through to your personal tax form, your personal life. The new rate on that's going to be 25%. That's good too. 25% pass-through rate on income earned by subchapter S and sole proprietors. Now, the LA Times doesn't like this. The problem with this provision is that in jurisdictions where it's already been enacted, like Kansas under the Tea Party Governor Sam Brownback, everybody from freelancers and petty contractors to huge partnerships are able to redefine ordinary income as business income to avoid any state income tax at all. I'll explain that. This is nothing new. Anybody that is a small business, their accountant advises them, file a sub S. Do your business as a sub S. All these rules are there they've been set there by 535 members of Congress over the years. There are no loopholes here. This is the law. Anyway, on balance, this thing has a lot of good stuff in it, but it isn't a conservative tax plan. It's not a pro-growth. Incorporated one of the greatest examples. They've got a cash pile of around $265 billion, and almost, I think, 70% of it is held overseas. And they don't report it as income here. They don't want to pay 35% on it. Their effective rate actually ends up being 26 to 24% every year, or every quarter. But they, for the most part, keep it parked in parts of the world where it has been earned at much more favorable tax rates. The repatriation rate is going to be a one-time rate of like 5.25%. Companies are going to be hard-pressed not to take advantage of this. It's a really, everybody's been asking for it. Let's see if they meant it. There's a statistic that is thrown around about taxes, and I find when I use it that a lot of people nod and they don't say, and I can tell they don't believe it. But half of the American people do not pay any income taxes. And it has been this way for quite a while. It's been this way since it started in the 1980s and it intensified in the 1990s. It's all part of the Democrat Party's class warfare and class envy business. And yet, while we now reach a point where 50% of American taxpayers don't pay any income tax, now they pay other taxes. They pay, if they're working, payroll taxes, of course. And they'll pay property tax if they own property, and they will pay, phone tax, gasoline tax, that stuff. But income tax, half of American taxpayers don't pay the income tax. This tax cut, therefore, cannot be for the middle class, as it's being touted. The brackets that we are talking about here are targeting people who only pay 2.5% of the total tax bite. They are not going to get significant tax relief because there isn't much yet for them to have. What's going to happen here is what always does. The middle class and the upper middle class at the end of the tax year are going to be paying more dollars. some way. They're going to be told that their rates have been reduced, but they're going to be paying more dollars. The property tax deduction being eliminated is one way. Look, there's some good things in this plan too, but it is not. It is not a tax cut for the rich, and it is not what they mean when they tell you trickle down. They can't stop using that term. They used it to attach it to the Reagan tax cuts in the 1980s, and what they mean by trickle down is that you give the rich a big pile of money, and they're going to share it, and they're going to give it away to people, and that's not what happens. And so then they say trickle down fails. Trickle down happens every day in your life. Trickle down is the United States economy. Apple building a brand new headquarters building that cost them $5 billion. Guess who gets the $5 billion? The people that built it. The architects, the construction companies, the contractors, the landscapers, everybody involved. That's trickle down. Apple has a pile of money they dedicate to a new building. They have to get it built. Everybody had a role in it getting built, gets paid. That's trickle down. It's good. Trickle down is exactly what happens when commerce is taking place, and it is how wealth is created. Trickle down as a term was devised as a way of besmirching and impugning the art laugher Reagan tax cuts of the 80s. And they were defined, trickle down defined as, well, we're going to give the rich a big tax cut, and somehow the middle class is going to end up with more money, and then the economy is going to grow. And then, of course, when it doesn't happen that way, when the rich do not become more charitable or stand on the corner and give money away, then they proclaim trickle down a failure. But Reagan tax cuts created the longest peacetime boom of economic activity in modern era. You even have some history revisionism going on now. No. They say it wasn't the Reagan tax cuts. It was the Clinton tax increases in the 90s that did it. And that is not really true. The bottom line is that half of American taxpayers are not paying any income tax at all. And this tax cut, while being touted as relief for the middle class, because that's what politicians do, that's where most voters are, is in the middle class. So you tell them two things. You tell them, finally, we are extending middle-class tax relief to the people who are the backbone of America, to the people who are responsible for America being a great nation. We are going to lessen their burden. Well, there's not much of a burden now on 50% of them. So of the middle class that will receive a tax cut, it accounts for 2.5% of taxpayers. Everybody else, one way or the other, is going to see their taxes not change or go up. And let me ask you something, folks. There's another thing that we do here, that not we do, they do. Whenever you hear this phrase, I want you to automatically realize that you're listening to Democrat Party language. I heard it yesterday when it was explained to me by ranking Republicans. When I said, why are you not reducing the tax rates at the upper bracket of 39.5? He said, well, we have to pay for all of these other tax cuts. And I didn't say anything because it would have been pointless to, but I remembered it and I made a note. We have to pay for it. That offends me like you can't believe. What is behind the belief when somebody in government says, we're going to give you a tax break, but we have to pay for it somehow? Means we've got to get the money back, because what it means is government cannot ever do with a dime less. And so if these people in their static analysis conclude that these tax plans are going to quote unquote cost the government, just making up a number here, $100 million, then they're going to find a way to get $100 million from somebody else in user fees or taxes or whatever, so that the government breaks even or ends up with more. Let me ask you a question. Is the national debt going down? Is the annual federal budget going down? On balance, is the annual budget deficit going down? The answer to these questions is all no. It doesn't matter if you have Republicans or Democrats pitching their economic plans or tax plans, the government always grows. You end up paying more no matter what. The government always grows. The government will never, ever do with less. And, of course, the government isn't doing with less. And it's not your fault. You're not running things. You don't set policy. There are 535 people who do that. Those numbers change. Well, the number doesn't change. The people that comprise those numbers change. People win elections, lose elections. They get appointed to a cabinet post or leave a cabinet post. But there are 535 people who determine all of this. And they all pretty much talk the same way. And none of it ever ends up really happening the way they say. There isn't going to be an overall reduction in the amount of money government collects from taxes with this plan or anything else. So if you know that to be true, if the government is not going to collect any less, then somebody tell me where the tax cuts are. Well, they are there. Certain groups are going to benefit some other way. Other groups are going to pay more. The way it was explained to me is the safest way Washington has found. Just soak the rich, blame the rich, and say, we're going to pay for tax relief for the very crucial, important middle class by not cutting the taxes of the rich. Okay, so we're going to demonize achievers. We're going to demonize the successful. We are going to pit the successful against the middle class, lower middle class, or what have you. So we're going to divide the country on the basis of this. We're going to create class warfare and class envy, and we're going to have people, we're going to try to make people resent the rich, which is not new. That's been going on since the beginning of time. People do that on their own anyway, without being egged on. But we live in a time where everybody on the left is preaching unity and getting along, and this doesn't do that. This continues to capitalize on divisions, capitalize on resentment. There are a lot of people in the middle class who are not going to get any tax relief, but they're going to be told that's okay. It's okay, but the rich are going to get soaked here. The rich are going to be paying more than their fair share, and that evens it all out. It doesn't help anybody else, except they've been conditioned to feel good when the government punishes or soaks someone else. And individually, when you go through the ingredients of the tax plan, there are individually a lot of good things here. You won't find them mentioned in the media. The media will not find one good thing about this. The repatriation tax rate, getting foreign money back on American shores, is good. The reduction in the pass-through rate, the subchapter S, to 25% is good. Capital gains staying where it is good. Alternative minimum tax being abolished is good. But then they remove the deductibility of state and local taxes, and that's going to hit a lot of people more than you think. People love deductions. Deductions are how people think they're screwing the government. They're a psychological thing. It's like people who love getting a big refund every April. They think they're really, really stuck into the government. They tricked the government. Look how much the government's giving me. You're not tricking anybody. You get a big refund, it just means that you let the government keep your money for a whole year at no interest in exchange for giving it back to you in a big lump sum that you don't usually see in your day-to-day life. So it appears to be a win-win. But I keep coming back to the idea that they're touting this as fueling the engine of growth. But you can't, that isn't going to happen if you leave the top earners' rate the same. Reagan cut taxes over a period of 8 years from a top marginal rate of 70 to 28%. And you know the drill. The amount of taxes collected doubled from $500 billion to almost $1 trillion. in 8 years by reducing tax rates. 70% to 28%. Kennedy cut them from 90% to 70%. Kennedy cut taxes in the 60s, too. And that caused an economic revival. So it is known how to do this. The Democrat Party hates this. They don't like you keeping more of your money. They want you to think you are, but you're not. Look at how big government is, and look how often it grows, and look by how much. You're not keeping more of your money, and you know it. You look at your disposable income. You look at the net. What gets deposited in your account every pay period, and you know you're not paying any less in taxes. And there hasn't been a significant tax cut since George W. Bush in the early 2000s. Anyway, that's an overview of this. Oh, and the Republicans are, just to reiterate, when you talk to them about the top rate and why it isn't going to be reduced, well, that's the president. You're going to talk to President Trump is insisting that the rich not get a break, because he doesn't think the rich people like him don't need any more. But that's the way Democrats talk. It's not their job to determine who needs what. And we go down that path and allow government to start determining who needs what, then they're going to start determining everybody's income. And they're going to start determining everybody's need for health care and need for food and need for drugs and need for whatever. It's none of their business what anybody needs, and it's not for them to decide. Got to take a break. We'll get back and get started on the phones. You want to weigh in on this right after this. Here's Jeff in Minneapolis. I'm glad that you called, sir. Great to have you here with us.
Hello, Rush. You mentioned earlier about the 50% not paying any federal income tax.
Right. No federal income. Half of American taxpayers pay no federal income tax, correct?
Correct. And now I am one of those people. My wife and I made a choice. One of us stays home with the kids. And so we make roughly right around $50,000. And we've never had anything taken out of our federal withholding. Every paycheck that comes, $0. Every state, the Department of Revenue for state, $0 comes out of us for every paycheck. We get a refund every year. Now, I don't know how it's called a refund, but it's called a refund of right around $7,000. I don't think people realize how that this is real. I mean, I don't agree with it. I'm probably the only conservative that thinks he probably doesn't pay enough taxes.
So you're a one-income family, and you have a gross income of 50, and they're not deducting any federal taxes from you.
Zero.
And they're not deducting state taxes?
Zero.
On what basis are you getting a refund?
Well,
you getting
I have
earned income tax credit or something?
Yes, I have a lot of children. That's just choices that we made.
How many children do you have?
I now have 8.
Well, that took about 40 minutes. 40 minutes, a couple of cigarettes if you smoke. So you got
a couple bottles of wine.
So, well, there you go.
Yeah.
All right. So,
but it's a real thing, and I've always had an issue with this. Now, I've had people say, my liberal friends, well, give the money back. It's just give it back. Well, I don't. I use that for expenses.
Do you know specifically if that $7,000 is related to something called the earned income tax?
The earned income credit, yes.
Now that's, I can't find anything on that in this plan yet, and I was not told anything about that yesterday during the explainer phone call. But if the earned income tax credit is not eliminated, then you see how this works. You might say, well, Rush, why if the tax code, if lowering taxes, why if it produces all this revenue, why is everybody so much against it? Well, that's not hard to answer. The reason, particularly Democrats, are not crazy about more revenue being produced. The Democrats are totally into class warfare and in fairness, Sander Levin, congressman from Michigan, on TV 20 years ago, had it explained that these rates are creating much more revenue to the Treasury. So I don't care about that. It's an unfair rate. The rich ought to be paying more than 28%. It's an unfair rate. But look at the revenue it's creating. I don't care about the revenue. It's an unfair rate. Besides which, the more independent people are, particularly financially, the less they tend to need Democrats. And Democrats don't like financially independent, poor, and middle class. So he is where they are trying to go, and they can't get there, but he got there. And so he's standing there. Does he not have the ability to help them get to where why do they have to cross the river to get where this guy is? Well, crossing the river, very, very dangerous, I guess. They could drown in there. But this guy got to cross it somehow. A helicopter dropped him in or something. This has always amazed me about reporters at disaster sites. They are not starving. They are not dying of thirst. They're not in danger. And they're 10, 15, 20 feet away from reporting on people that are. Remains, but is untouched. But other sources, Washington Post says that top Republican officials haven't decided what to do with earned income tax credit. Do you know what that is, folks? The earned income tax credit is a way of assuming poor people earn money. You just assume they earn money, and the amount is based on a formula, the earned income, and then they get a credit on what their taxes would be if they earned it. They didn't earn it. We assume that they did, and then give them a tax rate based on what they didn't pay. Now, the typical Washington thinking behind this is that this is how we're going to reward people who work, who try to get a job, as opposed to sit there and just cash welfare checks or food stamps or whatever. But this is all part and parcel of that statistic that 50% of income taxpayers in America don't pay any income tax. The earned income tax credit ends up giving essentially tax refunds because an earned amount of income is assumed, is calculated, and then they calculate what tax rate and what taxes would have been paid on that assumed income. And then after assuming the person paid the income, paid the tax, then they refund it. The only thing missing is that nobody paid anything. It's a scam. It is a way for a lot of illegal immigrants capitalize on this, but a lot of poor Americans do too. You can't blame them. Hey, it's these people in Washington setting up the rules. You know, we oftentimes sit there and blame the participants, but how can you blame them? If you tell a group of people, you know what, all you got to do is go out and get a job, and we're going to assume you earn a certain amount of money, and then we're going to assume you pay taxes on that amount of money that you're not earning, and we're going to give you a tax refund on the taxes you didn't pay. Who wouldn't go for that if you're in poverty or just barely above it? But if that's not gotten rid of, if the earned income tax credit, then all the rest of this is, well, it's just not what the Democrats and it's not what the media are saying. Let's go to the audio sound bites on this. New York Times, by the way, I'm sorry, the Associated Press, $5 trillion question for Trump tax plan, how to pay for it. They never ask that when Obama or Democrats are going to do a tax cut, because they never do one. I just remembered. The question of how we're going to pay for Obama's stimulus never came up. How are we going to pay for Obama's new health care plan never came up. It's only when Republicans propose tax cuts that how are we going to pay for this? And the premise is that Washington must break even, at least whatever tax policy or economic policy that emanates in Washington. It cannot cost the government any money. Oh, no. Government must at least break even. Why? Why can't government shrink? That's what conservatives believe. Now, we've heard endless talk about small government, efficient government. But since Newton and the boys contract with America in 1994, it hasn't happened. Never happens. Government constantly gets bigger, and if they don't have enough, they print what they need. All of this is smoke and mirrors. All of this designed to get votes. Here's Trump justifying the fact that there will not be much, if any, relief at all in the top tax rate.
Our framework includes our explicit commitment that tax reform will protect low-income and middle-income households, not the wealthy and well-connected. They can call me all they want. It's not going to help. I'm doing the right thing, and it's not good for me, believe me. But what is good for me, not only as president and legacy, what is good for me is if everything takes off like a rocket ship, like it should have for 20 years. That's good for me. That's good for everyone.
Okay. Right there's populism. That is pure. Some might say it's liberal. It's a derivative of Democrat Party class warfare rhetoric. Our framework includes our explicit commitment that tax reform will protect low incomes and middle income households, not the wealthy and the well-connected. They can call me all they want. It isn't going to help. So you see, we continue to demonize high earners and high taxpayers. We demonize them. Somehow, it's not fair. So we demonize them, and then we punish them. When everybody else is getting a tax break, they don't. And this is called fairness. What it really is how to get votes from the middle class. This is a pure populist approach. This is not a conservative approach to tax reform whatsoever. On this one, President Trump is who he is. He is a full-fledged nationalist populist, and this tax policy indicates that. That's fine. That's who he is. I've told everybody he's not a conservative. He's not an ideologue. And he thinks that there is great political value in telling the country that the well-connected and the rich aren't going to get anything. He is of the belief that a lot of people react favorably to the news that the rich are going to get soaked or that the rich are not going to benefit when everybody else does. That doesn't promote growth. See, that's the problem. They talk about this being a pro-growth plan. I'm just using the numbers here, folks. I couldn't care less personally either. The fact of the matter is the growth engine requires people being hired, requires people being invested in small businesses and their growth. And if there's no incentive, and if the high earners who do all that don't have any additional discretional income to hire, if they're going to depend on employees to grow the economy, let's look at it that way. You depend on employees to grow the economy. Nothing wrong with employees, but employees, by definition, don't have equity stake. Employees don't invest unless they buy stock, but I mean, in the management structure, the employees don't have any ownership. Something's going to have to happen for the employees to have more disposable income so that they can then create this economic activity. But the employees don't hire other people. They, by definition, get hired. So if you want growth, you're going to have the people who hire and who grow and who expand. You're going to have to find a way to get them more disposable income, too. If you leave them out, where's the growth going to come from? So I don't think, growth, schmoth. Any tax plan that comes along that genuinely raises more money to Washington, the Democrats still unilaterally oppose it because they say the rates are unfair. So it isn't about revenue. And by the way, why would it be? They can print money whenever they want. I think the whole federal budget's a scam. When we have a $20 trillion national debt and a deficit every year that's inexorably high, with no fiscal discipline at all, why even have a budget? Why even talk about budget constraints when your entity, the government, can just go print money? Or you go to the Federal Reserve and say, you know what? We need $5 trillion funneled to the stock market. We're going to call it quantitative easing. We need to print some money, give it to the stock market, because we want to infuse the stock market with new cash. It didn't cost anybody anything. And it worked. It grew the economy, but it's not I mean, it grew the stock market. And they just printed the money. So I find all of this. We need to grow of course, politicians want to grow the economy. That redounds to their favor if it happens on their watch. But that's not what. It's not going to happen as rapidly here as it could. Now, here's Schumer. This is classic. This is Schumer, Chuck U. Schumer, on the Senate floor yesterday. As I've said, there are some really good elements in this plan, folks. But listen to Chuck U. Listen to the way the Democrats want to deal with this. It's right out of the playbook, and it never changes.
What about the deficit? The chief economic advisor to President Trump, Gary Cohen, said the administration believes it, quote, can pay for the entire tax cut through growth, unquote, by using a dynamic scoring model. Gary Cohen comes from Goldman Sachs. If he used that funny kind of math at Goldman Sachs, he would have been kicked out. Dynamic scoring is fake math.
No, it's not.
Paying for tax cuts with growth is fake math. This idea that the administration can pay for a $5 to $7 trillion tax cut through growth is simply selling a bill of goods using fake math.
It isn't. Dynamic scoring is exactly what ought to happen. Let me explain this to you again. Static scoring is what the CBO does. So you have the federal budget, and let's say that, I'm just going to pick a number because it's close. Federal budget, $3 trillion. Now somebody comes along and proposes a tax cut that on paper is $1 trillion. And so the static scores, oh my God, government's going to be without $2 trillion. Government's going to lose $1 trillion and is only going to collect $2 trillion. Oh, wait. So then they have to find a way to pay for it. Well, nothing is static. If you give people in the country a tax cut combined total of $1 trillion, those people are in fact going to increase economic activity because they're going to have more money to spend or invest or whatever. You're taking the money out of Washington and you're putting it back in the economy. There's only one thing that can happen, even if they save it. It grows the economy. It takes the money out of Washington. It grows the economy. But the CBO doesn't count any of that activity that will take place after people get their tax cut. They stick there with the static. Oh, my God, government's out $1 trillion. And then that's when you hear the language, we got to find a way to pay for it. So if they've given a tax cut over here to Joe Schmo and his buddies, that's $1 trillion, then they're going to go raise taxes or fees or somewhere else to regain that $1 trillion. And guess what? There's no net new money in the economy, and government hasn't shrunk. It's only grown, and there isn't any economic growth because there really isn't any additional money in the economy. So Chuck U. Schumer's coming along and calling dynamic scoring fake math when it isn't. That's common sense. People do things with the money they get. They don't just put it in a mattress, Chuck. This is how these Democrats lie through their teeth about this. How in the world did Reagan cut taxes from 70 to 28% in 8 years and double the amount of money that was created by the tax code? How did that happen? More people were hired. More people were made taxpayers. Taxes increased, even though per capita taxes went down. More people paying taxes meant a lower per tax payment per person, but the combined total was way up. That's dynamic scoring, and it's damn time somebody did it. Static scoring is stupid. Static scoring is simple-minded. Static scoring is abandoning and denying reality. Dynamic scoring attempts to calculate what's going to happen when the economy has $1 trillion injected into it, like Obama's stimulus, which everybody loved back then when Obama did it. But Obama, he didn't put it where he said he was going to put it. He gave it to unions to keep them employed. He didn't build roads, bridges, schools, and all that happy malarkey that he promised. But still, it wasn't. In fact, it did end up with government. A lot of it went to state governments, state teachers, state this or that. It was a transfer from federal government to state. Much of it to unions, which came back to the Democrat Party as campaign contributions. That's another story. Money laundering scheme is what Obama's stimulus was. But it makes total sense. If you put $1 trillion in the economy by taking it away from government, giving it back to people to earn it, That's $1 trillion in the economy that wasn't there. Of course it's going to make a difference. But then the people in government, oh my God, we're out $1 trillion. We got to make it back. So they go and they raise somebody else's taxes $1 trillion to make up for the loss, which means there isn't $1 trillion in the economy. Everything's a wash. That's static, and that's what happens. And that's why when they do a tax cut that doesn't pay for itself, there isn't any growth. There can't be the way they do it. I got to take a break. This stuff, it ticks me off. It's been ticking me off for 29 years to put up with this lion stinking Dale. Hello, sir. How are you?
I'm great, Rush. How are you?
Fine and dandy, sir. You think I'm phrasing something incorrectly. What would that be?
You mentioned that people look at you like they don't believe you when you say that they don't pay income tax. But people like me, I'm in a similar situation to the earlier caller. I'm a low-income, single-income family, and we do get taxes, income taxes, taken out of our paychecks. We see that every week. The thing is, we get that back at the end of the year in a refund because of the earned income tax credit, like you were saying. But those taxes are taken out of my check here in Michigan. People see that every day. So when you say that they don't pay income tax, it doesn't compute with what they're seeing on their check stub.
No, I didn't mean, I'm glad you mentioned that. I didn't mean people like you who are getting your refund in addition to what you paid. When I talk to my friends, when I talk to anybody, just give them the stat that half of American doesn't pay it. They don't believe it. They don't believe the statistic, no matter who. I mean, some people by now understand it, but I'm saying I would wager you that when I first said it on this program that there were some doubting times. Oh, come on, half of America doesn't. That's typical right-wing BS. And I was just trying to make the point that it is true. Like Dale said, his taxes are deducted every year, every pay period, but he gets it all back and then some with the earned income tax credit. So when it's all in, he's not paying any taxes, even though he's deducted from every week or every 2 weeks, whatever his pay period is. At the questions and reaction things I say, I just checked the email during the break. Rush, you didn't pick up on an inconsistency. These people are lying to you. The first caller said that he benefits the earned income tax credit, but that he didn't pay any taxes during the year. His weren't deducted. Then this guy, Rush, just said that his are deducted. So which is it? Are these guys lying to you, or do you not understand? I said, neither one of them are lying. The first guy had 8 kids, plus him and his wife, and maybe a mistress or two, who knows? He's claiming at least 10 deductions on his W-4. So given how much he earns, none was deducted because he has all the dependents. The second guy had deductions taken out because he didn't have nearly as many dependents. You know that W-4, when you get hired, you fill out, that determines what your deductions are every pay period, how much is withheld. And it's based on the exemption you're going to get and how much you're able to deduct per child and dependents in your household. That would be your wife or your husband, depending on who's the breadwinner. And so you used to not have to say that, but now you have to say that or you get in trouble with the feminazis. But it was clearly, I mean, you're making $50,000, you got 8 kids, I guarantee you, you're probably going to have nothing withheld or very little. If you only have 1 or 2 kids, you're going to have some withheld. But the point is, when it all is done for at the end of the tax year, both of them are getting a refund of more than they paid, which in both cases is 0. And that is the earned income tax credit, because they both work. The earned income tax credit was set up as a guise. It was designed to fool Americans into thinking we were going to really incentivize people to go out there and work rather than clip coupons and food stamps. So the earned income tax credit, if you got a job, if you're trying to get ahead, if you're pursuing the American dream, but you don't earn very much, we will reward you anyway. We will assume you earn X, and then we will assume you're paying X taxes on X, and then we will refund even more to you, even though you may not be earning anything we've calculated. The official program observer is looking at me with a querying facial expression. Well, you won't know if we should ask it until you do. Nobody can hear it but me, so go ahead and ask it. Always has reward. Rewards, well, some people exploit it as a reward. Yeah, even on the welfare side, the more kids you had, the more AFDIC or FDC you got. Americans to families with dependent children, the more kids you had. That's why back in the day, poor people kept having kids, because every kid you had equaled X amount of dollars in federal tax refund every year. Why single people do get rewarded? You don't have to have kids. The kids part of the example is explaining why one of these guys had nothing withheld from his job, his pay, and the other had some withheld. A single person who doesn't have any kids is going to have a different W-4. He's going to have nearly as many deductions, so his take-home pay is going to be less because more is going to be withheld. And then at the end of it, that'll all be calculated. The earned income tax credit will come in, and it'll calculate all kinds of things. He's going to end up net plus. By the time his refund comes in, it'll be a refund of what he paid plus some additional, assuming what he would have made if he was. It's designed to work exactly the way it's working. And it's what permits the statistic to be true, that half of the American people paying taxes are not paying any. They may have their taxes withheld during the year, but at the end of the tax year, when you file and your refund is in your hands, then the net is you probably end up with much more in your refund than you paid or owed. And that is the EITC. And it is not referenced. USA Today says it's not going to change. The Washington Post says we can't find anything on it. I think what I was told yesterday, I asked a bunch of questions about various areas of tax policy for which there isn't a policy yet. And the answer was, well, that'll be done in the committees. The Ways and Means Committee, which is where tax law actually ends up being written. Kevin Brady is a chairman of Texas, and he's a chairman of the Ways and Means Committee. That's the tax writing committee, and that's where all this stuff actually is going to get written, and then goes to the full House, and then that goes to the Senate, and they conference rigmarole. We got Ryan in Irontown, Pennsylvania. Welcome, sir. Glad you waited.
Good afternoon, Rush. Mega dittos from Allentown, Pennsylvania.
Allentown, sorry.
No biggie. Hopefully my battery holds. It drains energy like excuses from the mouth of Hillary. Listen, I don't believe for a moment that the Republicans are going to get this done. These are the same people who told us we can't do taxes until we do health care. And then they bumbled around like stumbling boobs, and they weren't able to get health care done, and now we're back to taxes. So I predict December, they're going to come, they're going to vote, it's going to fail, and then they're going to say, well, we've already penned in for January to restart health care. Let's do health care then, and then we can get the taxes.
Well, I can't blame you for your snark. I can't blame you for your suspicion. I can't blame you for your doubt. I can't blame you for your lack of trust. You're only using intelligence guided by experience. I don't know what's going to happen with this. Your guess is as good as mine. The thing that confuses me, well, it doesn't confuse me because I understand this, but it still does confuse me in a way. Here's why. We have a circumstance in Washington that I'm telling you nobody on Election Day ever thought would happen. Nobody thought Donald Trump was going to win. On election night, nobody thought Donald Trump was going to win. Everybody in the establishment, because they believe their polls and they believe their experts in the media and they believe their own instinct, Do not doubt me. They were convinced that Trump was going to lose and lose in a landslide. That means that the Republicans in the House were preparing to govern on the defensive. There wasn't a one of them that thought they were going to win, and therefore there wasn't a one of them that was thinking joyously with their hands rubbing, oh man, look what we're going to be able to do after Trump wins. Nobody was thinking that. They were all thinking they were going to play defense, that their job was going to be stopping things or trying to stop Democrat things. And I frankly think that's a position that they would really rather have. I'm not convinced they like the power of governing or the pressure of it. But I do know they weren't prepared for it. I thought Trump was going to win. Many of you out there thought Trump was going to win. They thought we were nuts. They think and thought Trump is nuts. They didn't think Trump was going to win. Then Trump wins. And you know what I didn't see? Joy. I didn't see joy on the Republican side. I didn't see, there was some, but a lot of it was perfunctory. A lot of it on election night and election day and in days after featured Republicans running to the microphones, clearly shocked and stunned that they had won, and just being effusive in their praise for Donald Trump and crediting him with everything. They were shell-shocked. They didn't expect to win. They knew that they won because Trump won. That they didn't like, folks. They don't like Trump. They didn't like Trump. I don't know about now, but they didn't like Trump. They couldn't imagine Trump. He's an outsider. They're inside. They couldn't imagine any of this. And they weren't happy by it. But they couldn't act that way. Couldn't go to the microphones and tell you what I just told you. They could, man, we didn't expect this. We're not prepared for it. Oh, my God, this pig won? Oh, geez. Now what? They couldn't tell you that. They had to say great things about Trump, and they had to talk about, now we got no excuses. We got no excuse. And Reince Priebus came on this program the Friday after the election. And before I got a question out, he said, I know, we have no excuses. I said, that's right. But there wasn't any joy. I didn't see a lot of Republicans happy and excited. And the reason all of this matters to me, and the reason I'm spending time dissecting this, is because I think that the day needs to be saved. And I told Hannity today in this interview something that I've been saying the last couple of days. But folks, it's always something cool about seeing it said on TV. You don't want to miss it. I said, we are never going to have this opportunity again in our lifetimes. We are never going to have the White House and the House and the Senate. We are never in our lifetimes going to have this happen again, and I can't believe how little is being done with it. Even from a party standpoint. Forget conservatism. I don't even see the Republican Party trying to take advantage of this. And we know why. This is not what the donors wanted. This is not what K Street wanted. This is not what the establishment wanted. And just like the NFL owners are having to choose, oh my gosh, who do we side with? Our players who are disrespecting the game, disrespecting the flag, or do we side with our customers? They're siding with the players on balance. Well, the Republicans are not siding with their customers, the voters. They are siding with the people they are more afraid of. And that would be donors and influential, powerful policymakers, kingmakers. We don't know who these are. These are invisible people. The real power in the establishment is not an elected person. We don't know who it is. We might know who it is. I mean, but my point is, they're not seeking fame. They're not leading it, but they have a lot of power over who does and says what. The establishment is a very, very old and tradition, and it's steeped in all kinds of legacy tradition, and it believes that it alone runs that town, and therefore this country. And they weren't prepared for Trump, and they don't want Trump. And since Trump was elected, they have been trying to destroy Trump, and they still are, with the Mueller investigation, with the deep state intel leaks to the drive-by me. All of this is the establishment essentially saying, we don't like what the voters did, and we're going to try to overturn it. We don't think the voters know what they're doing. We don't think the voters have the brains to do what needs to be done, and this election proves it. And so they are in the middle of a process to try to get rid of Trump or render him ineffective. And what could be, the Republican Party could see the benefit to the party from all this if the Republicans would simply, if they would have in the past 6 months or in 6 next months, future, 3 months, just work for 3 months at moving Trump's agenda. That's what the people want. That's what American people, the majority of the American people, the voting public, that's what they voted for. Move on tax cuts and make it real. Move on repealing Obamacare and make it real. If they wanted to do it, they could do it. I mean, to fall back on the excuse, well, we only have 52 votes in the Senate. Even now with this tax cut, you hear what they're saying, and we're going to do it via reconciliation so they can't filibuster it. They're not even, it doesn't seem like they even want to take the fight to the Democrats on ideas in the arena of ideas. And the Democrats are smokable right now. This circumstance, this alignment is not going to happen again in my lifetime. And it's being squandered like I can't believe. I wondered about that because I didn't watch. And I knew they wouldn't show the stands if they were empty and if the fans were booing. But the question of why didn't the network show? Are you kidding? We need to get back to the phones. John in Allentown, Pennsylvania. I'm glad you waited, sir. What's happening?
Hello, Rush. Good day to you. Your comment is still there.
Yeah, right here.
Your comment about revisiting trickle down and the Apple example of the $5 billion building should be drilled into the 95% of the Americans who probably have no idea what you said. So to make a statement that the distribution of wealth is best regulated by the free economy creating and consuming goods and services. I think taxes are a necessary friction to the degree they provide the services that are needed to conduct that commerce, i.e. create and consume goods. But and I think we were warned about this by Hamilton way back when, I think it was Federalist 21, where he warned against the excesses of taxes and said that a consumption tax would be self-regulating and we should never tax individuals' industry.
I remember Hamilton rapping about that back then. That's right.
Yeah, well, that's all people do. They see the play, but they don't have no idea what he actually wrote. And so the left, with the tax policies, continues to try to penalize the people who drive the actual creation of goods and services, which ultimately are the things that are consumed, which is what raises everybody's.
Well, you just identified Democrat Party tax policy. You tax the achievers, you punish them, you hold them up as examples, you claim that they're benefiting unfairly. Richard Gephardt, a former congressman from Missouri, called them winners of life's lottery. Just lucky. Just lucky. Some of them are. The Kennedys were examples of lucky they inherited. But studies have been done on millionaires and above, and the vast, vast, vast majority of it came from work, not the lotto or Vegas or inheritance. You really think that 95% of people who heard me would not understand my point describing what went in the building and designing of Apple's new headquarters as an example of trickle down? I guess he hung up it there. I'll run through that again, maybe. But to me, that's a classic example of what an economy, a growing, thriving economy, is trickling down. There are any number of examples of it. I appreciate the call, John. We'll be right back because they've got a game tonight. The Packers are hosting the Bears in Green Bay, and the Green Bay Gazette has a story essentially saying that the Packer players are turning their backs on the fans. with something the Packers players are requesting the fans to do. We'll get to that in a minute. F. Chuck Todd is the host of the NBC show Meet the Depressed. It airs on Sunday mornings. There's a daily version of Meet the Press. Now, I have shared with you in the past that I have now the firm belief that many journalists who say that they're in the news business or in the media are trying to be a soft word. I'm not trying to be insulting. I'm trying to be descriptive. I think they're really uneducated. I think they don't know half what they think they know. And this lack of knowledge is accompanied by an arrogance and a condescension to everybody that gives the impression that they think they know everything and you don't know anything. I don't think they've been well educated. I think their education has been stunted and limited. It's not been broad-based. And it reaches so far as many of them not even understanding the basics of the foundation of this country. They don't understand the Constitution. Every damn one of them needs to take the course Introduction to the Constitution offered by Hillsdale College. And I offer as evidence for this Chuck Todd at NBC. Now, these people hate Roy Moore. They hate him to begin with because he's Christian. He used to be a judge in Alabama. He won the Senate Republican primary election over Luther Strange. And Judge Roy Moore is the judge that was involved in the Ten Commandments controversy in Alabama courthouse. He wanted them displayed. And, of course, the culture war effort by the left to wipe and erase any reference to Christianity was well underway at the time. And so he became a scourge. He became hated. And because he was white and Christian, became a racist, sexist, bigot, homophobe. So F. Chuck Todd, describing Roy Moore, who they instinctively don't like because they think he's a white zealot and a KKK guy. Chuck Todd led off yesterday's edition of the daily version of Meet the Press with the assertion that Roy Moore doesn't believe in the Constitution as it's written. Now, this is a profound insult to anybody who is in government, as a judge, politics, to say that he doesn't understand the Constitution. That just by itself is an insult. But wait till you hear why F. Chuck Todd thinks that Roy Moore is an idiot. He thinks that Roy Moore is an idiot because Roy Moore said our rights come from God, which is clearly stated in the Declaration of Independence. Chuck Todd thinks rights come from government. Chuck Todd thinks the freedoms you have, the freedoms you don't have, are the result of government telling you what you can and can't do, and that is how the country was formed, and that is how it shall be. Chuck Todd started by touting the election as a purge of the GOP establishment, Roy Moore winning and Luther Strange losing. Called it a crisis of confidence in Mitch McConnell, a weakened president who's now scrubbing his Twitter feed, and the political earthquake in Alabama underneath it all. Then he started jabbing at Roy Moore as a Christian conservative. He said, but that doesn't even begin to describe what the guy really is, and he could very well be your next senator. If you don't understand just how freaked out some folks in the GOP and the White House are about what that means, then you don't know Roy Moore. First off, he doesn't appear to believe in the Constitution as written. And then Chuck Todd played a clip from Roy Moore, who was telling a journalist the following: our rights don't come from government. They don't come from the Bill of Rights. They come from Almighty God. And Chuck Todd thinks the guy's an idiot. Chuck Todd thinks the guy's a brain-dead, extremist, white Christian, probably a white supremacist, and maybe even pro-KKK and Nazi. And that led Chuck Todd to say, after the Roy Moore soundbite, Chuck Todd's, that's just a taste of what are very fundamentalist views that have gotten him removed from the office twice as Alabama Chief Justice. And what Roy Moore said is absolutely spot on and correct. Our rights don't come from government. They don't come from the Bill of Rights. They come from Almighty God. The view of the Founding Fathers, and you would only know this if you'd been educated on it. I'm convinced Chuck Todd is uneducated on the Constitution, or maybe ill-educated. He's probably been taught the wrong thing about it. The founders of this country saw rights as inalienable, meaning natural, God-given, not something given by man. We are all endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights. Among them, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That's in the preamble, the Declaration of Independence, that 56 brave people signed, and that began the process of establishing an independent United States. The Declaration sets out the belief that we are all created by God, our Creator, and with that creation, we are born with rights. They do indeed come from God. The Constitution does not give anybody rights. What the Constitution does, ladies and gentlemen, is guarantee them. Because rights come from God, they cannot be taken away. They are natural. They are what we are born with. They are how we are born. In our own preamble, government rights don't exist. What government gives you, it can be taken away. Government can take away whatever it gives you. If that can happen, it's not a right. A right cannot be taken away. The Constitution doesn't grant a single person a right. It guarantees rights that the founders acknowledged we all have. Here's another way of looking at it. This is Ed Fulner, who was one of the founding members of the Heritage Foundation and president. He said, the Constitution doesn't grant us freedom. It permits government from taking it. And that's exactly why liberals hate it. The Constitution limits government. The Constitution doesn't empower government to proclaim rights because it can't. The founders didn't believe that rights came from government. The founders believed that the only thing government would do would be try to take them away from you or limit them. So they wrote a Constitution that limited what government could do. And Chuck Todd of NBC doesn't have the slightest idea. When he hears somebody properly reference the source of human rights, he thinks the guy is a conservative, wacko Christian fanatic because he doesn't know that rights come from government. And I dare say Chuck Todd's not alone. I'd say virtually every other journalist of his generation probably thinks something similar. And a lot of average, ordinary Americans probably think the government. I know college students today, snowflakes, what have you, they think the government grants rights, and they think the government should be even more powerful to take away certain people's rights, like your right to free speech. But the Constitution doesn't grant you the right to free speech, it guarantees it. What the First Amendment says is that no law may be written to abridge your freedom of speech. That the state cannot write a law limiting your freedom of speech. First Amendment doesn't say government grants us all the right to say what we want except for these circumstances. That's what the left wants to be able to do. They want to be able to limit speech. And right now, the speech that many leftists want to eliminate is conservative speech. Republican speech, however you want to look at it. They think it ought not be permitted. They think government ought to have the power to punish people that say things leftists don't want to hear. Chuck Todd thinks that's probably a good idea. Chuck Todd, doesn't know that that's unconstitutional. Or at least he indicates here he doesn't know that it is. But he's not alone, as I say. Saw something the other day again that not even a third of the American people can name the 3 branches of government. They have no idea. Legislative, federal, and judiciary. Executive, legislative, judiciary, no idea. I think the 3 branches of government are House, Senate, Supreme Court. If they get even that close. So why would they understand the source of rights? It's easy to understand if you're taught. But because teaching it requires mentioning God, the left will have none of it. Can't have God in the classroom. Can't have God in the public square. Can't have a nativity scene out there. Can't do that. And so anybody who does and wants God in public square is a Nazi, white supremacist, KKK fanatic, as far as the average ordinary leftist of today thinks. And many of those average ordinary leftists and their thinking are populating the drive-by media. And that's why I say they're dumb or they're uneducated or they're ignorant or what have you, but it's dangerously so in their case. I mean, I can understand I'm not liking Roy Moore. Nothing says they have to. Nothing says they have to respect him. But to not understand something as basic and elementary as that government does not grant rights. Government writes laws, but it does not grant rights. But you hear people throw the word right. I have a right to that chewing gum. I have a right to whatever I want. That is a right. If I want it, I have a right to. That's what people think of rights. Rights are what they want. Rights are what they don't want. I have a right not to hear what you're saying. No, that's not the right. Everybody has a right to free speech, but there isn't a single person that has to listen to you. But the left thinks that the right to free speech means you cannot not listen to them. You must listen to, and you can't disagree. That's what the First Amendment means to them. How many times have you heard a leftist say just recently they think the Constitution prohibits hate speech? Somebody's teaching them this. Yeah, you can't just go out and say hateful things about people. The Constitution says so. Their professors are teaching them this. Because if the almighty government says you can't say it, why, there is no other authority you need to cite. The almighty government says you can't say hate speech. There's no such proscription. Anyway, that's Chuck Todd and Roy Moore. Another interesting story here from Real Clear Politics. Political campaigning may be mostly pointless. What do you think this story is? Snerdley, you're highly tuned to this kind of stuff. If you see that headline, political campaigning may be mostly pointless. What's this story about? It is about the fact that Hillary Clinton spent more money than anybody spent a campaign, and it didn't get her a single vote. That Donald Trump didn't spend a dime and he won. And so, again, this is the political establishment being flipped upside down. Money has always equaled victory. Whoever had more of it won. But what a research project has found is that TV ads in the last 3 weeks to a month leading up to an election were not persuasive in changing people's minds how they were going to vote. And you know where I first saw this story? In an advertising magazine where they're very, very afraid television and radio stations are going to lose a lot of money because consultants are going to figure out it's wasted paid, whether the candidate wins or loses. It's another reason why ad buys are so big. I take a break here, folks. I know, NFL. It's coming. Notice it unless you needed them to print something for you. The kind of place that prints banners or flyers or business cards. Storefront businesses like this, they're not the first place a thief thinks to break into because there's not normally a lot of cash or merchandise on hand, but it happens. We have a listener here, Mike, who happens to own one of these kinds of shops. Been in business 15 years, no trouble whatsoever. And then one day he goes to work to find that his store has been burglarized. And you know what they took? They took his 3 computers. That's it. All of his company records were on those 3 computers. All of the graphics that he had printed for customers, himself, all on those computers. All of his customer records and all of his customer contacts and all the invoicing and all the amounts due, all that stuff, all on those computers. All of the artwork that had been entrusted to him by clients was on those computers. Now, lucky for him, he's a listener here, he has an iDrive account, which means that everything on those 3 computers was backed up on iDrive servers, which are in an off-site, secured, unknown location. That means that all of that data on all 3 computers was regularly backed up as he used those computers on iDrive servers. Not in his store, not even in his town. All those customer records and files, all the artwork that he had printed, safely backed up on an iDrive server. After Mike got over the shock and the anger of being burglarized, he got on the phone with iDrive, explained what happened. They express delivered to him a complete file of his data, including bootable backup of his system. They used FedEx to ship him an external drive of his most recent data backups. And with the purchase of a couple of new computers, Mike's business was up and running within 2 days because he had a bootable backup of his whole system plus redundant backups of all that data. And they had it. He didn't have to back it up or he didn't have to restore online. He could have restored online, but they sent it all to him on a drive via FedEx. When you sign up with iDrive, you have the ability to constantly back up your computer data. You don't even be aware it's happening. So that the day your computer crashes or you lose your computer or somebody spills something on it or it's stolen, you log on to iDrive from any other computer and you start downloading a backup and restore, and you suffer no loss. iDrive, the industry best, 3 years in a row awarded by PC Magazine, is offering the best data backup service, and they are. Otherwise, we wouldn't tout them. Plans start at $6 a month. And today, when you sign up and use my name, they'll give you 90% off your first year service. Now, don't misunderstand that. People, 90%, Rush, they must be desperate. No, they're eager. They believe in what they do, and they really want to help people, particularly those who don't understand the nature and the necessity of backing up data on a computer. That's what they do. They want to get you. And they want to keep you 90% off your first year's service. You can't afford not to do this, no matter what other backup usage or plan you have. You can't pass the deal like this up. It's iDrive.com, as in the letter, like iPhone. It's iDrive.com. Be sure and use my name. The NFL stack, I've got to share this one with you. This is Reuters. You ready for this headline? Senator says Russian internet trolls stoked NFL debate. Speaking of which, Jay Johnson, who was the Homeland Security Director for Obama, is out. He testified. Let me find this exactly when, what the date of this was. Today, Jay Johnson testified today, told lawmakers he is unaware of any evidence showing cyber attacks affected voting in the 2016 presidential election. Obama's Director of Homeland Security today said no evidence for the umpteenth time of any cyber attack in the 2016 election. And yet, what is Mueller doing? Looking for it. There isn't any. This from the Obama administration Homeland Security guy. So, but it doesn't matter because Russia stole the elections becomes something the left believes. They just like so many of these NFL guys really believe hands up, don't shoot. Don't doubt me on that. They're still worked up. They think Michael Brown was surrendering, had his hands up, and was murdered in the back by a cop in Ferguson. You can't blame them. The media continued to report that long after it was established that it didn't happen. Media they trust. And now this guy, the Russians are responsible for everything that went wrong with the Democrats, is what they think. A U.S. senator yesterday said Russian internet trolls seeking to polarize Americans helped fuel a debate ignited by Trump over whether NFL players should have the right to kneel during the national anthem. The assertion was made by Republican James Lankford, comes as congressional investigators probing Moscow's alleged meddling of the presidential election are focusing on how Russian agents use social media to spread divisive political content. So the Russians are responsible for all these players taking a knee during the anthem. And a United States senator thinks so. And this mission statement, it comes, I'll tell you who's responsible for it actually, something called the Bipartisan Alliance for Securing Democracy, but they are not bipartisan. And their mission statement is, they're a bunch of leftists, and they're spreading this news around. The Russians are responsible for trolling the NFL and fans and causing all this to happen. I mean, folks, when I see stuff like this, I lose faith. I get deflated a little. How can sensible people believe this crap? And if they don't believe it, why go out and say it anyway? I know politics, but for crying out loud, the Russians are responsible for what's happening right now in the NFL? Green Bay Packers national anthem plans continue to rile the fans. This is from the Green Bay Press-Gazette. A request by Packers players for fans to join them in a show of unity during the national anthem before the game tonight against the Bears has done little to calm the debate. Packers fans yesterday continued to blast the NFL, the team, and players for what they perceive as showing disrespect for the nation, the flag, the military, or the anthem by sitting, kneeling, remaining in a locker room, or locking arms during the anthem. Supporters say players are peacefully exercising their free speech rights on the best stage available. Nothing about free speech here, and it's not the best stage available. If they've got a legitimate grievance, go to Chicago and demand a meeting with Rahm Emanuel and ask him why in the hell there is so many black murders in that city. And not by the cops. They're not advancing it. They are dividing people. Standing for the anthem is not political. Not standing, kneeling. That's what's political. The anthem doesn't get politicized by standing and showing respect for the flag. Doing the opposite is what is divisive and political. The game has been hijacked. The game has been hijacked by people who do not intend it goodwill. The game is being hijacked by people who intend to harm. And the league and the owners seem to be right in there with it because, Trump's right that NFL owners are scared. He said they're scared of the players. It's not they're scared of the players. The owners are caught in their minds between rock and a hard place. They're afraid that if they don't support the players will strike or not play the game, and then that's not good. They're willing to roll the dice that you'll get over this as a fan after a while. And it's going to die down after a while. And it may take some weeks or months, but at the end of the day, things are going to get back to normal and everything's going to be fine. But they don't think that'll happen if they side with the fans over the players. It's not going to be the same. Nothing is ever the same after the left corrupts it. Nothing's ever the same after the left gets their hooks in it. Nothing is ever the same after the left politicizes it. That's exactly what's happening here. And the only people resisting it are the fans, and they're being mocked and criticized and laughed at and made fun of. I mean, really stop and think here what they're doing. Taking a knee, linking arms for a couple of minutes in the pregame is supposed to do what? Is it going to let people out of jail? Is it going to raise consciousness about cops killing black people? What's supposed to happen? What's happening is the NFL is being hijacked. If your intention, if you're a leftist activist, or not even active, if you're a leftist who thinks the NFL poses a problem to your view of what American culture ought to be, what would you do? You would find a way to depopularize it. How would you do that? You'd find a way to make the fans mad. You'd find a way to keep the fans out of it. And they know who the fans are. They know the fans are patriotic, love the anthem, the ceremonies, the tradition. Do things to tick those fans off so they stay away. It's working like a charm. The fans staying away, the fans wanting refunds on Sunday ticket, the fans not going to games, the fans not watching on TV. That's working exactly as intended. Do the NFL and players know this or not? I think it's just the latest example of a gigantic corporate entity not understanding who its customers are, not understanding its base, not understanding who its fans are. I think it's patently obvious. They're fans. The fans of the NFL are not a bunch of social justice warriors. They're not a bunch of college snowflakes. The fans of the NFL are people that make it hum, the people that pay the bills, the people that spend all the money to go to the game, watch the game on TV, do whatever. They are not militant agitators on the left. That's not who's there. The league obviously thinks that that's who their fans are. That those are the fans that must be appeased. That we must let the flag be disrespected as a show of unity? How asinine. That's what's happening. It makes no sense. Likely to happen because the company you're doing business with is subject to a security breach of one kind or another. I mean, look what happened to Equifax. This is the credit reporting company. They suffered one of the biggest security breaches in histoire a couple of months ago that put information for 143 million Americans at risk. An online hacker exploited a known flaw in their computers that it might have patched up before the attack, but they didn't. Now, nobody really knows how much data was obtained illegally yet, though Equifax confirms as of now it's in the hundreds of thousands, not the millions. Now, the point is that your data is in the computer records of dozens and dozens of companies, hospitals, government entities, and you have no way of knowing how good their security is. You trust it. This is something that happens to others, hasn't happened to you yet. A clever hacker may be able to obtain access to those records, use that score to obtain your identity, access your credit cards, your bank accounts, and much more. And this crime happens when you don't know it's happening. That's the thing about it. You don't know when it's happening. You don't know till it's happened. Long after it's happened that it's happened, when your bill arrives or some other odd things start happening. So what can you do? Answer is LifeLock. LifeLock's systems are constantly monitoring the web, looking for evidence that your identity is being misused, that somebody's got hold of it and is exhibiting a pattern of online behavior that isn't your pattern. That happens, you get called, you get alerted, asked, are you doing whatever you're showing on this pattern here? And you say, yes, that's me, don't worry about it, they go away. You say, no, I'm not doing anything right now. They get busy, track it down, try to stop it, find out where it's happening, and put an end to it. If they fail at that, because nobody's going to be able to stop every one of these things, they've got a restoration team that helps you fix whatever is broken. There's nobody else that does that. Now, it's important to say that no one entity can prevent all identity theft or monitor every transaction out there. But my friends, LifeLock, there's nobody even close to their ability to do this. Go to lifelock.com, call 800-440-4833. Either way, use my name as the promo code. You'll get 10% off your LifeLock membership. LifeLock.com or 800-440-4833. This is Trish in Lexington, South Carolina. Hi.
Hi, Rush. How are you?
Fine, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing great. Christian fanatical wacko dittos to you, I guess.
Well, great to have you here.
Thank you. I think that part of the problem is they've made the tax code so complicated and confusing that people can't understand simplicity. They can't even understand what gross and net are. And your first caller, the other thing to look into, Rush, is something called refundable and non-refundable credits. Because not only can you get earned income credits, but you can also get $1,000 back after.
You know what I have found, Trish? This is amazing. When it involves getting money back, everybody knows how to do it. Everybody's figured it out. When it comes to owing, the tax code is as complicated as anything they've ever seen. But I get your point. I'm sorry I misjudged. I thought I had a minute that I don't have. I've got to go. Mr.